the attacker would not know that if that email ID is valid or not. Okay. So if that rate limitation was in action, so that rate limitation action was not in action. Okay. So that's where I asked them, and that's they were told that, yeah, this is the root cause. Why they are kind of saying a spike. So we first figure out what's the root cause over here. So the root cause was that the sign up API call was not rate limited. Okay, so this is something what we found out, and later we investigated, and what we found out that, okay, 20,000 emails were valid, which the attacker is now knowing that these are the valid emails from this huge database of email address. And what the thing is that it is a common tendency of the user is to use common password from LinkedIn or let's say mysite.com. Okay, so in that 20,000, there were what they do is that rather than kind of checking the valid users one by one with this username and password from this big list, they shortened this list first from 1 lakh to 20,000, and then they kind of what they did was that now they went to like http mysite.com/login. Okay, and that's where they sent out the valid email address as well as the password that was mentioned over here in this database chunk. Okay, and now in this 20,000, what happened was that they were actually able to get 10,000 emails with valid passwords. Okay, and then they were able to kind of log in into the customer's email account, the account. Okay, and then they made multiple changes like bank account, the email address where the security code will go by. So they made all these changes into the attacker. Okay, and we got this alert only when the developer saw this spike. And thing is that we were able to kind of contain the incident in like let's say 1 day itself, because we were very we did that in a very fast speed, and we checked the logs, we found out the root cause, we found out what the attacker did, and we were able to kind of then the next steps were to kind of invalidate the user credentials. And there are also a lot of regulatory authority, like we need to inform legal, we need to inform data regulatory authorities and whatnot. So there a lot of things were in place. Okay, so thing is that now once how we discontain that, we first put a rate limitation into action. Okay, the rate limitation into action. Then what we did is that we invalidated the password. We changed the password of those customers. Okay, and then we informed the customer that they need to kind of log in with a correct, they need to reset their password. We also informed the legal team that there has been a massive access of customer account by the attacker. That's where the legal team actually worked with the data regulatory authority. They notified them what the impact was. So there are a lot of things that happened over here. So now, do you guys have any questions in this? And I hope this was an interesting case that that was solved by the concept of system design, knowing the concept of system design. So are there any questions or any kind of clarification on this incident, on this real incident? Okay. Yes. Yeah, go on.
So actually, as you said, like this case we handled, like there was some rate limitation problem that they haven't used in the sign up. So yeah, when you proceeded with this incident, like did you check any logs, or you just like came to the conclusion it is because of the sign up problem? So if you had checked any logs, so what were those logs? Was like you checked some proxy logs, or directly you checked the server logs? And what you got from those logs?
Yeah, so the first thing we did is definitely like we checked the server logs. So in this case, there was only one system where the logs were there, so we didn't have to jump to different other systems. So in that system itself, we got to know a lot of things, like what was the API request, what was the attacker, what was the range of the IP address and all. And we found out that the IP address was something like this: 154 dot something, then 2.3, then it was 154.34.25, 2.1. So it was a specific, it was following that IP address was actually following a specific CIDR range. This was a network host. Like this was not changing, only this was changing. Okay, something like this. And that's where we were able to kind of cluster that, okay, these are the valid attacker IP addresses. And what they're doing is they're trying to kind of reach out to the sign up. And so we did the analysis, and then from the analysis we figure out, okay, these are the potential attacker IP addresses that from where the attack is happening. And we also kind of looked at like the API call, we did the cluster, and we looked at the IP address segregation, like how so we something like this, like for in the range of this spike, like what's the range of IP addresses that are kind of common. So we found out that we found out that actually, like let's say there are a few valid IP addresses, few valid customers were there. There are few valid customers were there, obviously. But from the analysis of the IP addresses and the rate of, like let's say there is one IP address over here, for an example, and they have made a sign up API call for different email IDs, at least let's say 10 email IDs, this IP has checked. Okay, this have checked 10 email IDs, and the difference between them is, let's say, less than 1 second. 1 second. Okay, so using this parameter, we can figure out what are the potential attacker IP addresses. So the first thing is that we checked, okay, what are the IP addresses which had done, which had kind of sent out, let's say, more than one email address in quick succession. Okay, so what we found out that this IP address had sent out 10 email address checks in quick succession of 1 second, and then we were quickly knowing that, okay, this is the potential attacker IP address. And then we did additional checks. We found out that there was similar IP address was over here. So then we figured out that this is the potential CIDR range of the attacker. They are using a bunch of IP addresses. So what they also did is that they didn't just used one IP address to do the checks. They did some kind of multi-threading. Okay, and what they did is that they utilized CIDR range, and they distributed the email log file into that CIDR range of IP address to do the checks. So what will happen is that because of this suppression, what will happen is that over here, like let's say that this was not the graph that the developer had. Let's say they had a different graph, and the graph would be something like this. Let's say they were using a different metrics. For example, this is the time, and or let's say this is the IP address. Okay, so what would happen is that now, because there's not one single IP address. So if there would have been single IP address, thing is that there would have been a spike, that is a single IP address which is making a lot of connections. But now the attacker has implemented a certain mechanism to avoid that. So what they did is that they separated the email analysis over here, email checks over here into multiple, like almost I will say 200 IP address. Okay, with a belief that if the developers are seeing the matrix over here, they would see something like this again, something like a little bit of spike, and then all fine, because they are not using one single IP address, they are using a thousands of multiple IP address. But luckily the thing over here is that the developer had another kind of a matrix which would tell like the number of users signing up with this API call, and that's where we got a different kind of alerts, which was not depending on the IP address part, but rather on a different field like email address thing. Okay, so that's where we got a spike. So here the spike will not be there, but if we use the same data and we parameterize on different parameter like email, we got a spike over it. Okay, and that's like where we got to know that the attacker is not just using one single IP address. They are utilizing a range of IP address. They are located in Russia, for an example, and that's where we did the analysis of the log file, and we figured out what are the potential IP address that attacker had done. And once we got the list of IP addresses of the potential attacker, then we search the log file and we figure out, okay, what all email address has been kind of checked. Okay, and then we checked, the database team checked out like, okay, what are the valid email address, and then we got to know that, okay, these are the potential IP address, potential email address that the attackers know that has valid customers. And then what we also checked is that